So we need to finish this grade crossing that I started in the previous video. It crosses 5 tracks in my yard here, and it uses some concrete, some asphalt, and some wood. But we need to do a few things to make it better. And we're going to do some scenery around the tracks, some details. But before we get started, please be sure you hit subscribe down below so you can get notified when we make a new video. Let's see what we're going to do here. So you can see here, I've already started to sand this down a bit. It looks much better faded than this shiny stuff here, which is what it looks like right out of the bottle. So I'm using 150 grit sandpaper, and you can see it quickly transforms it into some nice faded asphalt. So it's not very difficult. So I need to touch up some of the ballast here and bring it up to the edges of the pavement. So I'm just using a cup full of this stuff. This is a fine black blend from light cinder blend from Scenic Express, and it works well for my yard. I might use something different. And I want to drag it up to the edges of the pavement, so I'm using a fan brush here just to manipulate the ballast a little bit. I also use a cosmetic brush sometimes, or I can use a chip brush for bigger areas, or just if you want to be a little more aggressive with it. So we're going to secure this with spraying it with alcohol first. Then I use my mix of glue and water, 50-50. And this is a hair dye bottle, which works great for applying it. If you see the glue isn't penetrating the ballast well enough, you can always go back and spray the alcohol. So while that ballast is drying, I just wanted to show you this real quick. I did this recently. This structure is here, and it was right at the edge of the layout, which is this, you can see the line here. I've added this 1x2 to do a bit of a land grab. There wasn't enough room here to do proper details like I want to do, stuff like this, this is not glued down yet. I'm just kind of playing with it to see where it goes. But this just gives me a little bit more edge to work with on the edge of the layout, and it only comes out 3/4 of an inch, so it's not going to interfere too much with the aisle space that I'm trying to maintain. And it's just screwed in. It's painted black to match the fascia. It is a little bit of a bump out, but that's okay with me. It's worth it for what I get around this section. I'll just have to add some plaster to match the concrete surface here, and we'll blend it all in another time. So one of the details I want to add here is this fire hydrant on a little piece of concrete on a sidewalk section. And we're probably going to stick it right about there. And it's an easy detail to make. This is just a piece of task board or mat board, and we can just paint it a concrete color and then stick our hydrant on there. But we got to get it kind of in here, so we got to do a little surgery. So I should have put this in first, of course, before I ballast it, but sometimes these things come up later. So So one thing that will tie this all together is some weathering powder to create some streaks of vehicles going by. So we could use a blackish brown or a brown and just make some passes here. That's some brown, that's some black, I think. Actually, I don't like the brown. I think I'm going to use some black. And now I've got some grimy black here. This is from Archive X acrylic paints. And I need to create some like oil stains from locomotives and vehicles, or rather trains passing by. So this time we're going, instead of going across the crosswalk or the grade crossing, we're going to add some stains on the track area You'll want to continue these on the track as well. Usually I'll have these going down the entire length of the track here, especially in a yard where trains are moving slower and more often. There's definitely going to be grease and oil. So you can see with these two different layers of weathering, the powdered chalk here and the oil drips, it really kind of grounds the whole crossing to the scene by blending it. It's kind of sandwiched between these layers of nature and weathering and garbage and grease. And that's kind of what you want to happen. And that's when it looks lived in, it looks like it's been there. And that's why the more layers of scenery and weathering you put, the more realistic it will look. And even now I'm just looking at this fire hydrant here. It also just, it's something your eye knows exactly how big it is, so you get a sense of scale immediately. When you have something repetitive like just rails and ties, we know how big a railroad track is, but that in particular, kind of your eye focuses on it and your brain suddenly knows how big everything is. So I think I'm going to add a different kind of stain in addition to this grimy black stain here. Let's find something else. So this is an AK product, engine oil, appropriately named. So we know exactly what we're dealing with here, and it's a brownish oil color, and it'll add some variety to our stains here. So I'm going to add some Prairie Tufts, which are these little tiny bushes. These are from Martin Wellberg, which you can get at Scenic Express. And you just dip them in some glue and just plant them. So these are some bushes also from Martin Wellberg. They just kind of pull apart, and then we can glue them in place. So there is some static grass here in between the tracks, but it's a little weak. I think I want something a little more defined, a little more green. So I'm adding this foam just to the very middle of the space between the tracks. And now you can see it quickly defines them a little bit better. And it attaches itself to the other scenery elements like the Prairie Tufts here a bit. And you want to make sure that you blend the same kind of scenery material from one end to the other, and you want it to fade away, but this at least connects it to each side, because if it's growing here, chances are it's growing there as well. And since it's a fragile little pile, I don't want to use my spray, so I'm using my dropper with my alcohol to hold it in place. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is add a figure in the scene. I'm going to use this little guy here, and this is a figure Dave Ravella gave to me many years ago at one of the Craftsman Structure shows, and I keep it around and I move it around from diorama to diorama because it's such a nice looking figure. And on the rare occasion that I do paint figures, I use this as a reference guide. But he's going to finally have a permanent home here on the layout, so we need to drill a hole in the ground because he's got a little wire to mount him, and then we'll glue him in place. So that's it for our grade crossing. I'm really happy with how it turned out. It really does tie both sides of that little scene together, the switch tower on one side and the rip track scene on the other, and it's opened up some opportunities for some more detailing as I go. I'm going to do that in the future. I hope it gives you some ideas on your own layout, and I want to thank everyone on Patreon. It's growing a little bit at a time, but it is growing. Thank you guys. If you want to get some exclusive content, some behind the scenes pictures and photos we don't post anywhere else, check out our Patreon page and get to your workbench. We'll see you next time. Thanks.